In the modern American experience, technology has become inseparable from daily life. Smartphones rest within arm's reach from the moment people wake up to the moment they fall asleep. Social media platforms promise friendship, visibility, belonging, and constant communication. Messaging apps allow conversations to continue without interruption across cities, states, and continents. Video calls collapse distance. Online profiles allow individuals to shape identities, curate impressions, and remain visible even when physically absent. On the surface, it appears that Americans have never been more connected than they are today. Yet beneath this unprecedented level of digital connectivity lies a growing emotional contradiction. Despite constant communication, many people report feeling lonelier, less understood, and more emotionally distant than ever before. This paradox sits at the heart of Sherry Tuckel's work. She argues that while technology offers the illusion of companionship, it often undermines the deeper human connections that give relationships meaning. Americans are connected but alone together, sharing space with others while retreating into screens that demand attention but rarely provide true intimacy. Technology does not simply enter relationships as a neutral tool. It reshapes expectations, behaviors, and emotional habits. It teaches people how much attention to give, how quickly to respond, and what level of emotional exposure feels safe. Over time, these subtle shifts alter how individuals relate not only to others but also to themselves. Tuckel's central concern is not that people use technology, but that technology increasingly defines the terms of human interaction. One of the most significant changes is the shift from conversation to connection. Conversation requires presence, patience, vulnerability, and a willingness to tolerate silence. Digital connection, by contrast, is efficient, controlled, and easily edited. A text can be ignored, a message can be revised, a post can be deleted. Technology allows people to manage relationships without fully engaging in them. This management feels safer, but it also reduces emotional depth. Americans increasingly turn to devices during moments of discomfort, boredom, or uncertainty. Instead of sitting with difficult emotions or navigating awkward social situations, they reach for their phones. Over time, this behavior trains the mind to avoid emotional complexity. Relationships become thinner because they're no longer the primary space where emotional skills are practiced. Technology becomes a buffer between people and the raw experience of being human together. Tuckel emphasizes that this shift has consequences that extend beyond individual relationships. Families, friends, romantic partners, and even workplaces experience changes in how attention is given and received. Eye contact becomes intermittent. Listening becomes partial. Presence becomes divided. People are physically together, but mentally elsewhere. This state of being alone together becomes normalized and even expected. Another core issue is control. Digital communication allows individuals to control how they present themselves and when they engage. This control is seductive. It reduces vulnerability and minimizes the risk of rejection. However, meaningful relationships require a loss of control. They involve responding in real time, navigating misunderstandings, and exposing unpolished emotions. When people prioritize control over connection, relationships lose their emotional richness. Technology also changes how people define friendship and intimacy. Social media platforms quantify relationships through likes, followers, and comments. These metrics encourage comparison and performance rather than mutual understanding. People may have hundreds or thousands of online connections while lacking a few deep relationships where they feel truly seen. The abundance of shallow connections can mask emotional scarcity. Tuckel argues that Americans have come to expect more from technology and less from each other. They turn to devices for comfort, affirmation, and distraction rather than seeking these experiences through human interaction. This reliance weakens social bonds because it shifts emotional labor away from relationships. When people no longer practice being there for one another, they lose the skills required to do so. The emotional isolation Tuckel describes is not always visible. People may appear socially active, engaged, and busy. Yet beneath the surface, there is often a sense of emptiness or dissatisfaction. Digital interactions rarely provide the sustained empathy and understanding that come from face-to-face connection. They offer stimulation without nourishment, presence without depth. This paradox raises an important question. If technology is designed to connect people, why does it so often leave them feeling alone? Tuchel's answer lies in how technology reshapes habits of attention and communication. It encourages multitasking over focus, responsiveness over reflection, and broadcasting over listening. These habits erode the foundations of meaningful relationships. In this exploration, the focus is not on rejecting technology, but on understanding its psychological and social impact. Technology reflects human desires, but it also amplifies them. It magnifies the desire for efficiency, control, validation, and escape. When these desires dominate relationships, they displace patience, empathy, and commitment. As Americans navigate a world increasingly mediated by screens, they face a choice about how they relate to one another. They can allow technology to define intimacy on its own terms, or they can reclaim conversation presence and emotional risk. Tuchel's work invites reflection on what is being lost in the pursuit of constant connection and what might be regained by slowing down and engaging more deeply with others. This discussion unfolds across multiple layers, including personal relationships, family dynamics, childhood development, workplace culture, and broader social norms. Each layer reveals how technology subtly but powerfully reshapes human connection. The goal is not to inspire fear, but awareness. Awareness creates the possibility of choice, and choice creates the potential for change. Conversation has long been the foundation of human relationships. It is through conversation that people learn empathy, negotiate differences, express vulnerability, and feel emotionally recognized. Sherry Tuchel argues that one of the most profound effects of technology on American society is not simply how often people communicate, but how they communicate. Digital tools have gradually replaced face-to-face conversation with forms of interaction that are faster, more efficient, and more controllable, but far less emotionally rich. Texting, emailing, and social media messaging allow people to stay in constant contact without engaging in real-time dialogue. These modes of communication remove many of the elements that make conversation meaningful, including tone, facial expression, pauses, and emotional nuance. While these tools are useful, they also encourage a style of interaction that prioritizes brevity and convenience over depth. People say more while sharing less of themselves. One reason digital communication feels so appealing is control. In conversation, responses must be immediate and spontaneous. There is little time to edit or hide uncertainty. Digital messages, by contrast, allow individuals to craft responses carefully. They can rewrite, delete, delay, or ignore messages entirely. This sense of control reduces anxiety and lowers emotional risk. However, it also removes the vulnerability that builds trust and intimacy. Tuchel emphasizes that when people avoid conversation, they avoid the emotional labor that relationships require. Conversation can be messy, unpredictable, and demanding. It forces individuals to listen even when uncomfortable and respond even when unsure. Digital communication offers an escape from these demands. Over time, people lose confidence in their ability to handle real conversations because they practice them less often. In American culture where productivity, efficiency, and speed are highly valued, conversation increasingly feels inefficient. Silence is perceived as awkward. Pauses are uncomfortable. Technology fills these gaps instantly. Phones provide distraction during moments that once invited reflection or connection. Waiting rooms, dinner tables, and public spaces that once fostered casual conversation now host individuals absorbed in separate digital worlds. This shift has consequences for emotional development. Conversation teaches patience, attentiveness, and emotional regulation. When people rely primarily on digital communication, they miss opportunities to practice these skills. Emotional misunderstandings become more common because digital messages lack context. Empathy weakens because people do not witness each other's emotional cues. Another issue is divided attention. Even when people are physically present, technology often competes for their focus. A phone placed on the table signals potential interruption. Notifications fragment attention and reduce the quality of interaction. Tickle's research shows that even the presence of a silent phone can diminish the depth of conversation. People share less personal information and avoid emotionally sensitive topics when they expect interruption. This constant partial attention creates relationships that feel less secure. When individuals sense that they are competing with devices for attention, they may feel undervalued or dismissed. Over time, these small moments accumulate, leading to emotional distance. People may stop initiating meaningful conversations because they anticipate distraction or disengagement. Digital communication also alters expectations around availability. Americans increasingly expect immediate responses. Delays are interpreted as disinterest or rejection. This pressure creates anxiety and encourages superficial replies rather than thoughtful engagement. People respond quickly to maintain connection, even when they have little emotional energy to give. The emphasis on responsiveness over reflection undermines thoughtful dialogue. Conversation requires listening fully before responding. Digital platforms encourage constant output rather than deep processing. This shift affects not only personal relationships, but public discourse as well. Complex issues are reduced to short statements, reactions, and polarized exchanges. Tickle warns that when conversation declines, people lose an essential space for self-discovery. Talking with others helps individuals clarify thoughts, understand emotions, and develop identity. Without these interactions, people may struggle to articulate feelings even to themselves. Technology offers expression, but not necessarily understanding. Another consequence of reduced conversation is increased loneliness. While people may exchange many messages, they often lack moments of genuine emotional connection. Loneliness is not the absence of contact, but the absence of meaningful contact. Digital communication can create the appearance of social activity while leaving emotional needs unmet. Americans often turn to technology to avoid difficult conversations. Conflict is managed through silence, unfriending, or indirect messages rather than direct discussion. This avoidance prevents resolution and deepens misunderstandings. Relationships become fragile because they lack the resilience built through honest dialogue. Tickle does not argue that technology eliminates conversation entirely, but that it redefines its role. Conversation becomes optional rather than essential. It is postponed, replaced, or minimized. Over time, people forget why it mattered in the first place. They settle for connection without conversation, unaware of what they have lost. Reclaiming conversation requires intention. It involves setting boundaries with technology and valuing presence over convenience. It means tolerating silence, discomfort, and emotional risk. These qualities cannot be replicated by devices, yet they are central to human connection. Now focus will move to how these changes affect family relationships, particularly between parents and children, and how technology shapes emotional development from an early age. The influence of technology on relationships becomes especially visible within families, where patterns of communication, attention, and emotional presence are formed early and reinforced daily. Sherry Tickle emphasizes that family life in America has been quietly but profoundly reshaped by digital devices. Parents, children, and adolescents now navigate relationships in environments saturated with screens, and this saturation alters how emotional bonds are built, maintained, and experienced. In many households, technology has become a constant background presence. Phones, tablets, televisions, and computers compete with family members for attention during meals, conversations, and shared activities. While these devices often promise education, entertainment, or connection, they also fragment family interaction. Moments that once allowed for casual conversation and emotional attunement are interrupted or replaced by screen engagement. Children learn about relationships primarily through observation. When they see parents repeatedly distracted by devices, they internalize the message that attention is divided and that emotional availability is conditional. Even brief interruptions can have lasting impact. A child who feels ignored during moments of excitement, sadness, or curiosity may learn to suppress emotional expression or seek validation elsewhere. Tickle's research highlights the concept of the still face effect, which shows how children react when caregivers become emotionally unresponsive. When a parent's attention shifts to a screen, the child often experiences a similar sense of disconnection. Over time, repeated experiences of partial attention can influence a child's sense of security and self-worth. Parents often justify device use as necessary for work or household management. While these reasons may be valid, the emotional consequences remain. Children do not distinguish between productive distraction and avoidant distraction. What they experience is the absence of full presence. This absence shapes how they understand intimacy and responsiveness. Technology also changes how families manage emotions. Instead of comforting children through conversation, parents may offer screens as a solution to boredom, distress, or restlessness. While this approach provides immediate relief, it bypasses emotional engagement. Children miss opportunities to learn how to identify, regulate, and communicate feelings. They learn to self-soothe through devices rather than relationships. Adolescence introduces additional complexities. Teenagers use technology to explore identity, maintain peer relationships, and seek independence. Social media platforms become central spaces for validation and belonging. While these platforms offer connection, they also intensify comparison, performance, and anxiety. Teens may feel pressure to present curated versions of themselves while hiding vulnerability. Tickle notes that teenagers often prefer texting to talking because it feels safer and more controllable. Difficult conversations with parents are avoided in favor of brief messages or silence. This avoidance weakens parent-child relationships and reduces opportunities for guidance and emotional support. Family conflict is also transformed by technology. Disagreements may be ignored through digital withdrawal rather than addressed through discussion. Family members retreat into separate digital worlds instead of negotiating differences. This pattern prevents the development of conflict resolution skills and emotional resilience. Another significant shift is the erosion of shared family rituals. Mealtimes, bedtimes, and leisure activities once served as anchors for connection and conversation. When these moments are interrupted by devices, their emotional value diminishes. Families may spend time together without truly being together. Technology further complicates boundaries within families. Parents struggle to model healthy device use while managing their own dependence. Children receive mixed messages about limits and expectations. This inconsistency can lead to conflict, resentment, and confusion about priorities. Tickle does not argue that technology harms families by default, but that unexamined use creates unintended consequences. Families often adopt devices without discussing how they affect relationships. Without clear boundaries, technology fills emotional gaps rather than supporting connection. One of the most concerning outcomes is emotional outsourcing. Families rely on technology to entertain, educate, and comfort children instead of engaging directly. Over time, this reduces emotional intimacy and weakens relational bonds. Children may grow up surrounded by digital interaction, yet feel emotionally unsupported. The long-term effects of these patterns extend into adulthood. Individuals who grow up with limited face-to-face emotional engagement may struggle with intimacy, communication, and empathy. They may prefer mediated interaction and avoid emotional risk. These tendencies reinforce the cycle of connection without depth. Tickle emphasizes that family relationships remain a powerful site for change. When parents model presence, attentive listening, and intentional technology use, children learn that relationships require effort and care. Small changes, such as device-free meals or dedicated conversation time, can restore emotional connection. Understanding the role of technology in family life allows Americans to make more conscious choices about how they relate to one another at home. These choices shape not only individual relationships, but broader social patterns of connection and isolation. As technology reshapes family dynamics, it also transforms how adults form, maintain, and experience romantic relationships and friendships. Sherry Tickle argues that digital culture has redefined intimacy in ways that prioritize accessibility and control over emotional depth and mutual presence. Americans now navigate relationships in environments where communication is constant yet often emotionally thin. Romantic relationships increasingly begin and develop through digital platforms. Dating apps, messaging services, and social media provide efficient ways to meet, connect, and assess potential partners. While these tools expand opportunities, they also encourage a transactional mindset. Profiles reduce individuals to curated traits, images, and brief descriptions. Connection becomes a process of selection rather than discovery. Digital communication allows partners to stay in frequent contact without sustained engagement. Texting throughout the day creates a sense of closeness, but often lacks emotional substance. Couples may share updates, emojis, and brief affirmations while avoiding deeper conversations. This pattern can create the illusion of intimacy without the vulnerability that true intimacy requires. Tickle notes that technology offers a sense of companionship without demanding full emotional commitment. People can feel connected while maintaining emotional distance. This arrangement feels safer, especially for those who fear rejection or conflict. However, relationships built on limited vulnerability struggle to endure stress, disagreement, or change. Technology also alters expectations around availability and reassurance. Partners may expect immediate responses as proof of care. Delays can trigger anxiety, jealousy, or mistrust. This constant monitoring creates pressure and reduces emotional autonomy. Relationships become measured by responsiveness rather than understanding. Social media further complicates intimacy by introducing performance into private relationships. Couples may feel compelled to display happiness online, even when experiencing conflict. This public presentation discourages honesty and deepens isolation. Individuals may compare their relationships to idealized versions of others, leading to dissatisfaction and insecurity. Friendships experience similar shifts. Digital platforms make it easy to maintain large networks of acquaintances while reducing the time invested in close relationships. Friends may interact primarily through likes, comments, and brief messages. These interactions maintain visibility but rarely provide emotional support. Tickle emphasizes that friendship requires time, shared experience, and conversation. When communication becomes fragmented, friendships lose depth. People may hesitate to reach out during moments of vulnerability because they fear burdening others or receiving superficial responses. Technology also enables selective engagement. Individuals can choose when and how to interact, avoiding difficult conversations or emotional demands. While this flexibility feels empowering, it weakens relational commitment. Friends may drift apart without clear endings, leaving relationships unresolved. Another critical issue is the fear of being alone. Digital connection reduces solitude, but does not eliminate loneliness. People may remain in constant contact to avoid confronting emotional emptiness. Technology fills silence, but does not provide companionship in the deepest sense. Tickle argues that Americans have become accustomed to relationships that ask little but promise constant affirmation. This shift lowers expectations for emotional effort. When relationships require patience, empathy, or sacrifice, individuals may retreat to the safety of screens. Trust is also affected by digital transparency. Access to messages, online activity, and social networks can fuel surveillance and suspicion. Instead of building trust through communication, partners may rely on monitoring behavior. This dynamic undermines emotional security and mutual respect. At the same time, technology offers opportunities for connection, especially for those separated by distance or marginalized by geography or circumstance. Tuchel acknowledges these benefits, but cautions that they should not replace embodied relationships. Digital intimacy works best when it supports rather than substitutes face-to-face connection. The emotional habits developed in romantic relationships and friendships reflect broader cultural values. Efficiency, control, and immediacy shape how Americans relate to one another. These values conflict with the slower, uncertain nature of emotional intimacy. Reclaiming depth in adult relationships requires revaluing presence, conversation, and emotional risk. It involves choosing moments of undivided attention and tolerating discomfort. These choices challenge the convenience offered by technology, but restore meaning to connection. The influence of technology on relationships extends beyond private life into the workplace, where communication, norms, attention patterns, and emotional expectations have been fundamentally transformed. Sherry Tickle argues that American work culture increasingly values efficiency, responsiveness, and constant availability at the expense of meaningful human interaction. As a result, professional relationships often mirror the emotional distance found in personal connections. Digital tools enable collaboration across time zones and institutions. Emails, messaging platforms, and virtual meetings allow work to continue without physical presence. While these tools increase productivity, they also reduce opportunities for spontaneous conversation and informal connection. Interactions become task-focused, leaving little space for emotional exchange or mutual understanding. In many workplaces, responsiveness has become a measure of commitment. Employees are expected to answer messages quickly regardless of time or context. This expectation blurs boundaries between work and personal life, creating chronic stress. Relationships with colleagues become transactional, defined by output rather than empathy or trust. Tuchel notes that constant connectivity reduces time for reflection. Employees multitask during meetings, check devices during conversations, and respond to messages while engaging with others. This divided attention diminishes the quality of collaboration. People listen less deeply and misunderstandings become more frequent. Virtual communication further flattens emotional expression. Tone and nuance are easily lost in text, leading to misinterpretation. Without face-to-face cues, colleagues may assume negative intent or disengagement. Over time, this erodes trust and makes cooperation more difficult. Leadership is also affected. Managers who rely heavily on digital communication may struggle to convey support or recognize emotional needs. Employees may feel unseen or undervalued. The absence of informal check-ins reduces opportunities to address concerns before they escalate. Tuchel emphasizes that workplaces depend on relationships as much as on skills. Innovation, creativity, and problem-solving thrive in environments where people feel psychologically safe. Technology-mediated communication can undermine this safety by limiting vulnerability and honest dialogue. Public life reflects similar patterns. Americans increasingly engage with civic issues through digital platforms rather than community spaces. Online discussions are often polarized, performative, and emotionally detached. People express opinions without listening, leading to misunderstanding and division. Technology encourages broadcasting rather than dialogue. Individuals share statements to gain visibility rather than engage in conversation. This style of interaction weakens empathy and reinforces echo chambers. Complex social issues are reduced to slogans, reactions, and outrage. Tuchel argues that when public discourse loses conversation, it loses its capacity for mutual understanding. Democracy depends on the ability to listen, negotiate, and compromise. Digital communication often rewards certainty and speed over reflection and humility. The emotional cost of these changes is subtle but cumulative. People feel pressured to remain connected while feeling increasingly disconnected. Work becomes a site of constant demand rather than meaningful contribution. Public life feels hostile rather than collaborative. Technology also alters how people experience self-worth in professional and public spaces. Metrics such as likes, shares, and response rates become proxies for value. This quantification of attention encourages comparison and performance rather than authentic engagement. Tuchel warns that when relationships are shaped primarily by technology, emotional needs go unmet. People may feel efficient, productive, and informed, yet emotionally exhausted. The absence of meaningful connection leads to burnout and disengagement. Reintroducing conversation into professional and public life requires intentional cultural change. Organizations must value presence, listening, and reflection. Leaders must model boundaries and prioritize human connection over constant availability. On an individual level, Americans can choose to resist the pressure of perpetual responsiveness. Setting limits creates space for deeper engagement and restores emotional energy. These choices challenge prevailing norms, but support healthier relationships. Beyond its effects on families, friendships, romance, and work, technology profoundly shapes how individuals experience themselves. Sherry Tuchel argues that emotional isolation in American society is not only a social condition, but an internal one. Technology influences how people understand their emotions, develop identity, and cope with loneliness. The result is a self that is constantly connected, yet increasingly uncertain and fragmented. Digital platforms invite individuals to construct and manage identities. Profiles, bios, posts, and images allow people to present curated versions of themselves to the world. This process encourages performance over authenticity. People learn to share what gains approval rather than what reflects inner experience. Over time, the gap between the performed self and the lived self can widen, creating emotional dissonance. Tuchel emphasizes that identity development requires solitude, reflection, and conversation. Time alone allows individuals to process experiences and understand emotions. Conversation allows identity to be shaped through recognition and response. Technology reduces both. Constant stimulation leaves little space for reflection, while superficial interactions limit meaningful feedback. Loneliness emerges not from being physically alone, but from feeling unseen and unheard. Digital connection often fails to meet these emotional needs. People may receive constant updates and messages, yet lack moments of genuine recognition. This form of loneliness is especially painful because it exists alongside apparent connection. Technology offers quick relief from loneliness through distraction. Scrolling, watching, and messaging fill empty moments. However, these activities do not address the underlying desire for connection. They postpone rather than resolve emotional discomfort. Over time, individuals may lose the ability to tolerate loneliness and seek immediate stimulation instead. Tuchel notes that Americans increasingly turn to technology for emotional support. Devices become companions, offering entertainment, affirmation, and escape. While technology can provide comfort, it cannot replace mutual emotional care. Reliance on devices weakens the motivation to seek connection from others. Emotional awareness also declines when technology dominates attention. Individuals may struggle to identify feelings because they rarely pause to reflect. Emotional vocabulary shrinks, and complex feelings are reduced to simple reactions. This limitation affects relationships because people cannot communicate needs they do not recognize. The constant presence of others online also intensifies comparison. Social media exposes individuals to idealized portrayals of success, happiness, and connection. These images distort perception and increase feelings of inadequacy. People may feel alone in their struggles, believing others are thriving. Tuchel argues that technology encourages external validation. Likes, comments, and shares become measures of worth. This dependency undermines internal stability. When validation is absent, individuals may feel invisible or rejected. Emotional resilience weakens. Another significant shift is the avoidance of vulnerability. Digital communication allows people to control exposure and retreat when uncomfortable. This control reduces risk but also prevents deep connection. Vulnerability requires being seen without filters and edits. Without it, relationships remain shallow. The self shaped by technology becomes oriented toward constant input. Silence feels unsettling. Boredom becomes intolerable. Yet boredom is a gateway to creativity and self-understanding. When boredom disappears, so does an important space for emotional growth. Tuchel emphasizes that learning to be alone is essential for learning to be with others. Solitude builds emotional independence and self-knowledge. Technology undermines solitude by filling every quiet moment. Without solitude, individuals may struggle to bring a stable self into relationships. The experience of loneliness is therefore both a symptom and a cause of digital dependence. People turn to technology because they feel lonely and feel lonely because technology replaces deeper connection. This cycle reinforces emotional isolation. Breaking this cycle requires reclaiming spaces for reflection and presence. It involves choosing moments of disconnection to reconnect with the self. These moments support emotional clarity and resilience. Sherry Tuchel's central message is not a rejection of technology, but a call for responsibility, awareness, and intentionality. Technology is not destiny. The emotional isolation experienced in American society is not an unavoidable consequence of digital progress, but the result of unexamined habits and misplaced priorities. The future of human relationships depends on choices made both individually and collectively. The first step toward reclaiming connection is recognizing what has been lost. Many Americans have grown accustomed to constant digital interaction and no longer notice its emotional cost. Awareness restores choice. When people understand how technology shapes attention, communication, and emotion, they can decide when and how to engage. Conversation must be revalued. Face-to-face conversation remains irreplaceable because it requires presence, listening, and vulnerability. These qualities build empathy, trust, and understanding. Reclaiming conversation means creating spaces where devices are set aside and attention is undivided. It means allowing silence, discomfort, and emotional complexity to exist without escape. Families play a crucial role in this transformation. Parents who model intentional technology teach children that relationships matter more than devices. Simple practices such as device-free meals, shared routines, and attentive listening rebuild emotional bonds. These moments communicate worth and security more powerfully than constant availability. In romantic relationships and friendships, intentional presence restores intimacy. Choosing to talk rather than text about important matters deepens trust. Accepting emotional risk strengthens connection. Relationships grow when individuals are willing to be fully present even when it feels inconvenient or uncomfortable. Workplaces also hold responsibility. Organizations that value reflection, conversation, and emotional intelligence create healthier environments. Leaders who model boundaries and presence signal that people matter more than constant output. Productivity and humanity need not be opposing forces. On a broader level, American society must reconsider how it measures connection. Quantity does not equal quality. Metrics such as likes and followers do not reflect emotional depth. Cultural values that reward speed, efficiency, and performance must be balanced with those that honor patience, care, and understanding. Solitude must be reclaimed as a positive space rather than something to avoid. Time alone without digital distraction allows individuals to reflect, process emotions, and develop a stable sense of self. This self-knowledge strengthens relationships because it enables authentic engagement. Technology can support connection when used with intention. Video calls can sustain long-distance relationships. Messaging can supplement conversation. Online communities can offer belonging. The problem arises when these tools replace embodied interaction rather than support it. Tuchel emphasizes that human beings are relational by nature. Emotional fulfillment comes from being seen, heard, and valued by others. No technology can replace the experience of mutual presence. When people remember this truth, they can resist the pull of constant distraction. The challenge is not to disconnect entirely, but to reconnect more deeply. This requires courage because presence involves uncertainty, vulnerability, and effort. Yet it is through these qualities that meaningful relationships are formed. Americans stand at a crossroads where they can continue down a path of increasing connection and decreasing intimacy, or choose a different approach that honors both technological innovation and human need. The choice is ongoing and requires daily attention. Ultimately, the question is not how connected people are, but how connected they feel. Emotional connection cannot be automated, optimized, or quantified. It must be lived moment by moment through conversation, attention, and care. Sherry Tickle's work serves as a reminder that while technology shapes society, humans still shape technology through use and values. By choosing presence over distraction, conversation over convenience, and empathy over efficiency, Americans can rebuild the emotional foundations of their relationships. The future of connection remains open, and it begins with the simple act of putting the phone down, looking at another person, and listening.